Hi everyone, and welcome to another preview by ThinkerThemer. I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie.
Hello.
I'm all about the mechanics, Maggie is all about the theme, and today we are super excited to be previewing Septima by Mindclash Games, designed by Robin Hegedus.
In Septima, we are going to be playing as the leader of a coven of witches. And ultimately what we want to do is we want to make sure that we prove ourselves worthy to be the next ultimate leader or ultimate guide of all witch folk. Currently, our fearless leader is the witch Septima, and we have to make sure that over 4 seasons or a year, we conjure up enough wisdom points to impress her and take over. The way we're going to do that is we're going to be going around collecting ingredients, making sure that we make potions so we can heal patients all about town, and then also making sure that we are helping save some of the witches that may be going to trial, potentially recruiting them to our coven, but also making sure that we don't raise too much suspicion, because every time we do things that are magical, a bit too magical, particularly if we're in cahoots, we're going to be raising suspicion from the local witch hunters, which is not a good thing.
Now, before I talk to you about how this game plays, please remember that everything you see here is in prototype form, including the rules, so there might be some slight tweaks in the final production copy. But let's talk about how you get things done in Septima. So Septima relies on simultaneous selection of cards from your hand that are going to be revealed and tell everybody the action that you're going to want to take. So there's a lot of hand management that goes into this game. Now, I'm going to step you through a few of these different actions and explain what's going on here on the board. First of all, we have these player boards. These player boards represent our different covens, and we have a leader witch and an apprentice witch. They both have individual powers that are going to allow you to break the game in a little way, have some bonuses when you do some different actions, and ultimately you're going to be able to recruit some more witches to join your coven, and that is really important for endgame scoring, but I'll come back to that. Now what you can see on the main board is that we have this beautiful forest and town center where we're going to be able to collect resources and make house calls to heal sick patients. So it makes sense that the first action is that we can move. So if I played the move card, I'd be able to move my little witch meeple up to 4 steps. Now, the next thing we want to get done in this game is we want to collect ingredients to make potions as witches do. So the next card is collect. If I was to play this collect card, I would be able to collect resources from the adjacent hexes around my witch meeple. However, this game is played across 4 seasons, and within each of these 4 seasons there are 5 rounds, i.e. you are going to be playing 5 cards from your hand out of a total 9. So each round we are going to move this little tracker between the different phases, and what you can see is that on either side there is a resource depicted. And when you use the collect action, you are only allowed to collect the lunar resources that are available to you during that round. So for example, right now, I would only be able to collect blueberries and mushrooms, so I would only be able to collect the blueberries and mushrooms that are next to my witch meeple. Now, why do you need ingredients? Well, the next action I want to explain is brew. So you're going to have all of these beautiful ingredients here collected on your player board, and then you're going to be able to mix them according to a potion sheet that explains all of the different potions that you can make. So there are 3 different types of patients in this game, or 3 different types of what were seen to be ailments of the time. So they are represented by different colored patients that are drawn randomly and placed out onto the board. So to cure a plagued patient, the green patient, you would need a green potion. And to make a green potion, you would need some kind of green weed.
I think it's probably sage would be my guess.
Some sage,
mushrooms?
some green weed, and some mushrooms. And if you combine those together, you're going to be able to get yourself one of these green potions. And these are super cute little green potions. They might not be final components, but they are really amazing. So you would collect this potion action to keep on you, and that is the brew action, brewing up to 3 different potions. There are also a different type of potion that give you one-off abilities in the game, but that's really just to help you get things done. Now let's come back to the actions, because the next one that I want to explain is the heal action. If I was to play the heal action, I would be able to cure 2 patients that are adjacent to my witch meeple. So I want to make sure that I'm next to these patients now, and then I would need a blue and a green potion here, or a paralysis and a plague potion to be able to cure these 2 patients. Now, why do you want to cure patients? Because they give you a lot of victory points at the end of the game, as well as some benefits along the way. So on your player board, there are going to be 3 tracks, one that relates to each of the different types of patients. And when you cure a patient of that particular type, you are going to be moving these markers up these tracks and taking the bonus that you're covering up along the way. So that gives you a little boost or a hand to get more things done in the game. But at the end of the game, wherever you reach the end of these tracks, you are going to score these victory points. So if you can cure 5 of these pink or blindness ailment patients, by the time you get to the top of the tracker, it's going to be worth 25 victory points, or wisdom points, I should say, at the end of the game. The other thing you want to keep your eye on is that you also get a bonus 7 victory points for every step that all 3 markers have gone up on those tracks, therefore rewarding variety as well. I'm going to come back to the rest of the cards in a moment, but first I want to talk about one of the key mechanics in this game, which is suspicion. As a witch, you don't want to draw any attention to yourself, and that happens when 1 or more players play the same card as either Septima or as each other. So for example, if Maggie and I both played the heal card at the same time, that would be considered a match, and it has some benefits and drawbacks. The key benefit of matching, and the reason why you might want to anticipate what people are doing, also noting that Septima has symbols you can match with that change every round. The benefit is that there is a secondary action depicted on each card, and you would be allowed to therefore do that secondary action. So it can be super powerful to match because they give you additional benefits that you wouldn't get otherwise. However, when you do match, you're going to draw some attention, and the way that that is shown is with this suspicion track that is on your player board. And what's going to happen is when you get suspicion by matching with Septima or others, you're going to go up on this track. Now, this track dictates the range that these witch hunters have on this map. So if you raise suspicion at any point on your turn, you're going to be rolling the suspicion die. You roll the die and this says +1, for example. I'm going to add the +1 to where I am on the suspicion track, which is 2. So I've got 3 suspicion, which means that the witch hunters have a range of 3. They move in the same way as your witch meeples, but they are coming after you. And so you always want to make sure that you are keeping a safe distance away from the witch hunters. So when you're out in the outside collecting resources, the more powerful resources are around the outside of the board, which puts you closer to the witch hunters and in the line of danger. So your suspicion is something that you want to closely monitor, because the higher it is, the worse each turn is going to be when you want to match, because you do want to match to get some powerful abilities. Now, what happens when a witch hunter catches you? If a witch hunter is within range of you and you roll that die and unfortunately you've been captured by the witch hunter, all that happens is you're going to lose your leader witch to a trial. So unfortunately, you've raised so much suspicion that you're going to be up for trial and determined whether you are indeed a witch or not. Which brings me back to the actions you can take, because at the end of every season, so 4 times in the game, there is going to be a witch trial phase. And in this witch trial phase, there are 2 chambers where there are potentially witch trials. The first one is predetermined by the game. There will always be 1 witch here for you to be able to either recruit or send off as guilty as a witch. And there might be 1 here depending on whether players have lost witches along the way. Now, the next action that I want to talk about is the recruit action, which gives you the ability to add these loyal citizens, which are your personal meeples, into the trial crowd area. So I would be able to add a loyal citizen to this crowd area. If I matched with someone else, it would allow me to add an additional loyal citizen to this crowd area. Now, why that's important is because of the way the trial works. So if we imagine that we're at the trial phase, what would happen is we would all look at our suspicion levels and add some more angry mobsters into this area. Hostile citizens. Angry mobsters is what I like to call them.
Why are they mobsters all of a sudden? It's like the mafia just crept in.
They're part of the angry mob. Mobs, not that type of mobsters.
Yeah.
So we would add them in. So I would add 1 because of where I'm at on here, and Maggie would add none. So we would add 1 in, and then all of these meeples go into a bag, noting that this is our little bag that we just had on hand.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there will be one with the game. And what we're going to do for the trial is we're actually going to pull meeples out of the bag and place them one by one around the witch that is currently under trial. And we continue this until we've filled up the entire space up to the player count that we're playing. So for a 2-player game, we would stop here. And basically what you're looking at here is the number of votes for and against this witch. The reds are -1. The whites are neutral and worth 0. And then mine here would be worth +1 point each. In this case, it's a tie, essentially. We net out at 0, which means that this witch is saved. And because I had the majority of loyal citizens in that group, I get to keep that witch, which is going to give me a new power if I decide to put it up here as a leader or an assistant witch. It's also important for the end game, which I'll come back to. We would then repeat that process for the second witch in the second witch trial above, and then a new witch would be revealed for the next round. But let's talk about the next action, because that helps to explain the plea action. The plea action is going to allow you to, during a round, actually put a citizen from the crowd into any trial chamber, which means you've got a better chance of winning that witch and a better chance of getting the higher amount of victory points, which you do when a trial is won. The next action allows you to move up the rite track, and I haven't spoken about the rite track. That is this board that is separate to the main board that's shown here on the left-hand side of the screen. Now, what's interesting about this rite board is you can play a much simplified game and play with just the main board. If you want to add in the rite board, it's kind of like a little side game. Every time you match with opponents or with Septima, and you can match the symbol that's shown there, you will be able to move up this rite track. Now, the benefits of moving up this rite track is you might collect some wild gem resources along the way, but mostly you want to be able to collect these charm cards, because these charm cards are going to give you one-off abilities that you can use throughout the game, and the rite track also allows you to refresh those cards once they've been exhausted. If you can get to the very top part of the track, it's also going to provide you, of course, with more wisdom or victory points at the end of the game. And speaking of endgame, that's the one other thing that I wanted to talk about in this game, because it's quite interesting the way it plays out, because at the beginning of the game, you are going to start the game with a book of divinations, and that has 4 potential endgame scoring conditions that vary in terms of their difficulty. So it might want you to heal a certain type of one type of patient, or be in a certain location on the right track, or have some leftover potions or resources at the end of the game. However, you can only score the number of endgame conditions as the number of witches that are in your coven, which is quite an interesting tension, because you don't want to be losing witches along the way, because ultimately that means you're not going to be able to score all those objectives you've been working hard to go out for the rest of the game. So that's a basic overview of how Septima works, and now we'll talk about our review.
All right. Well, the first thing, and again, obviously knowing that this is a prototype, so things may change. The artwork, though, everything about the look and feel of this production, even at a prototype level, is amazing. Like, I really, really love the art direction that they've taken with this. I love the color and the tones, the illustrations. We have wooden components, like little wooden tokens. again, not sure if obviously they may change. It just adds such a beautiful tactile element as you're collecting your resources and you're kind of creating your potions. Your potions themselves are quite beautiful.
The potions are really beautiful, and as Maggie pointed out when we were playing one of our first games, the resources that go into making the potions are also depicted on the bottles
inside.
Which is such a great attention to detail. It's really beautiful.
I'm going to say right out of the gate, this is an incredibly thematic experience. So many of the different elements, all of the way that things interact with one another, the whole thing makes perfect thematic sense in terms of, when you're matching, and obviously there's a little bit more magic happening, or you're getting to do more things. Of course, it's going to be raising suspicion, and then those witch hunters are going to be out to get you. It's just such a beautifully done integration in quite a fun experience, even just the first time around as you're kind of learning it and wrapping your head around it.
Yeah, because the theme is so thick, and then also all the mechanics tie in with that, and then it's beautiful. It was such a pleasure to get this game to the table, and everyone we played it with was super excited to get stuck into it. It's just a fantastic concept. Now, in terms of the decision making that you're making along the way, the very first decision you need to make is your starting resources. And I didn't talk about this in the mechanics, but it's something that I really, really love.
It's probably my favorite thing of the whole.
It is a really cool. Your favorite thing of the whole game is
actually to the point where I wish there was more of it, and it wasn't just at the start of it.
That is true. It is really fun.
It should be embedded as, but there should be more opportunities to do that action.
Yeah, so let's talk about how it works. So at the beginning of the game, everyone gets 2 of these prologue cards, and they depict different resources. They also depict potions. They might depict the ability to put a loyal citizen into the crowd to begin with. And what's really interesting is on your player reference sheet, you have a 3 times, a 2 times, and a 1 times. And what you're going to be doing is playing around with the order of these cards and how you want these to be layered in 3, 2, 1, because you're going to be able to get 3 of the starting resource, 2 of the center resource, and 1 of the bottom resource or action. So it's a cute little puzzle.
It's so simple, but it's so satisfying.
Yeah, it is really satisfying.
It's all good stuff.
If I had both of these cards and I wanted to get both potions, I'd have to think about how I would layer that to then be able to start with 2 times of this pink potion, which would be most excellent. So that's just a really cute little way to determine what each player starts with, and the decision making therefore is it's live from the very first moment that you sit down.
But also starts kind of shaping your strategy, because you're looking at your divination card and going, okay, what am I trying to achieve towards the end? You're looking at the type of patients that are about town, and you're going, oh, okay, well, what ingredients am I going to need to brew what type of potion? And so it already gets the gears in motion, which I really love.
And then let's talk about the tension points in this game, because I love them. The first tension point is between matching with opponents or matching with Septima and raising your suspicion, because you do not want to get caught by these witch hunters, because you're going to lose witches, which means that there's 1 less scoring condition that you're going to be able to score. Plus, the witches themselves have abilities that, of course, if you run out of witches, you're going to have no little bonus abilities that you can use throughout the game. So it is very important that you decide when you want to match and when you don't want to match. But I really like the idea and the concept of Septima. So Septima always has a changing matching action, and you can see which one is upcoming as well, which allows you to plan out your moves a little better. So for example, I might not match this round with the move, but know in my mind that I would like to do a recruit action next, and I know I'm going to match with Septima. So I really like that little element of being able to see a little bit of what's coming in the future, but then the surprise element of not knowing what your opponents have and what they're going to reveal, and therefore you might match when you don't intend to match.
I think that's so clever, this whole concept of, sometimes you do want to match because you're getting to take sometimes a fairly powerful secondary action. But then if you're matching too much, you're like, actually, I don't want to match anymore because I'm raising, my suspicion is just going through the roof. And now I'm really precarious, and the witch hunters are going to get me and going to lose my witches. So I think that's such a beautiful, push and pull. I think really well done.
Yeah, and the second tension for me is, of course, that coven size versus the end game scoring, because towards the end game you're thinking about, well, how many of these am I actually going to achieve, and do I need to win a trial to get another witch to be able to unlock another scoring condition, and therefore my end game might be squarely focused on getting as many loyal citizens into this bag as I can so that I can recruit another witch and therefore unlock something really powerful in my book of divination. So I really, really enjoy those two tension spots. But I also want to talk about the witch hunters, because in games I'm not really a fan of admin. I'm also not a fan of like NPCs or anything that you need to facilitate. Anything that you need to facilitate. But this is so easy because the witch hunters are not moving around all of the time. They're simply showing you how close they are to you in which area, and therefore we're calculating their range but not moving them. So I really like that. It's a really easy thing to implement. It also scales up throughout the game because these are the 4 seasons of the game, and you can see in the second season and in the third season, fourth season, second and fourth, Amy, they are going to be added to the board, which is adding increasing amounts of pressure on the players.
Closing in on you, Now, I also want to talk about the trial mechanism, because every time there's a trial, because you first get to see the crowd and how many angry people are part of that mob, and at the same time, how many loyal people, how many of your own kind of citizens of your own color are there. So you're like, oh, exciting, I may win some of these, or I may really help sway some of these, because obviously the more you win, the more those trials are won, even if you yourself don't win, you're going to get a lot of points. That always then, all those citizens going into that bag, and that drawing out one by one, it inevitably became a very thematic experience every time, because you're kind of going, oh, Sin, I don't know, or Nicholas is not looking good
He's
for
a
you.
witch.
And then so you're pulling out the first one and go, oh no, it's a red one, and then it's like, oh yeah, no, it's a loyal. And so it's a very exciting, unexpectedly exciting moment every round, at the end of every round.
But then the really nice thing about it is, even if the trial fails or they're found guilty and that witch is taken off the board, you still get some consolation points. So if your loyal citizen was pulled out as part of that trial, you'll get 1 victory point. Or if the witch is found to be innocent, you'll be getting 2 victory points per meeple that you have out here. So what's interesting is if you are not the person who has majority and can recruit that witch, you get to go back into the crowd, which means next round you're already a step ahead in winning some of those witches in the trial phase. If you can't tell already, we absolutely love this game. But of course, we wouldn't be doing our job as reviewers if we didn't mention a couple of things that we've been in discussions with Mindclash games in terms of feedback. The first thing is the rite track. So this brings in a more advanced element of the game. It is incredibly difficult to make your way up that track. There are some blank spots which allow you to move up if you match any action, but then you can get really stuck. For example, if I was here, there's only 2 actions that I can match with in order to continue moving up that track. We often found that the rite track was a little bit too much effort than it was worth, but you could move up it and get some incidental benefits. But we didn't find anyone was racing to the top because the point to the top are only really 3 victory points.
There's a 5 and a 10.
As long as you pay resources.
As long as you pay resources when you get there. But it's so tough to get there.
It is quite brutal.
Because the only other way there's a couple of other ways to kind of move up, which is with some of your healing as you're moving up your patient track. And then also some of your other, one of your actions is moving up the right track. But you usually, with the patient track, it's not that often that happens. I think there's only just like a couple of those instances. And the action card, you usually are wanting to use your action cards for other things. Because again, the rewards on this track are not really all that great until you get quite a way up. So I agree.
hope that becomes a little bit easier. We'd probably suggest maybe a couple of tweaks there, unless it truly is the very advanced variant and we just haven't upskilled ourselves enough yet.
Which could very
well be true.
Yes.
Another thing is that in the prototype version, at least, we did give some feedback about seeing some more diversity in the witches that you will see throughout the game, and they are intending to do that in the campaign, which is fabulous. And the final thing that we will mention is the replayability aspect. So this is, at its core, a much simpler game than any other Mindclash game released. We've played most of them, and they all have quite a high rules overhead, and it means they don't get to the table very often. This is very squarely in the mid-weight level of game, and at its simplest form, without this rite track here, it's a fairly basic, straightforward game about collecting resources, turning them into potions, and healing patients with a little bit of a trial fun element. And what that means is the more you play this game, it does start to feel a little formulaic in that there's certain things that you absolutely have to get done, and therefore everybody's trying to do those things, and it can feel a little bit linear with a little bit of shifting to the sides depending on when you want to match or not match, or win a trial or not win a trial. So the only variation that really differs how you play the game is the Book of Divinations, because that sets your starting objectives and gives you something to aim for, which might change your strategy throughout the game. But you're basically playing within the same space of doing the same things in each game, which brings us to a couple of the expansions that we have had a chance to try in prototype form. The first one is Omens.
Yeah, so the Omens introduces sort of like events in a way, but the interesting thing with the Omens is they kick in after the trial. So at the end of each season, there's a trial. The trial, whether the trial is successful or unsuccessful, will determine if the Omen is a positive thing that's going to affect for the next round, or a negative thing that will again affect every player.
And it is interesting because it is a like collective, almost semi-cooperative objective, because if you don't all ensure that this first trial is a success, then you are going to all be implicated and going to have something negative.
Yeah, so you're all invested because it's going to affect everybody. Yeah.
But the second and main expansion that we want to talk about is the animals. So you will see in the campaign there are animal meeples in this game, and what that introduces is a new action called Transfigure that replaces the chant action from the base game. And this is a really interesting expansion because what it introduces is a retrieve mechanic. So in this game, when you're playing your action cards, one of the tensions that I didn't mention earlier is that in order to play those cards, you're going to be playing 5 out of your total 9 cards in your hand, and you don't get your cards back until the next season. You do have one action card that's called Remember that will allow you to repeat an action that you did already in that season. But what's interesting about this Transfigure expansion is that the Transfigure acts like a retrieve card. It allows you to play it, it allows you to collect all your cards back up, but at the cost of being turned into an animal. So my witch would be replaced by a cat, and now I'm a cat, and that has some implications for what I can get done. It reduces the number of actions that I can do, so my cat is far more limited than my witch in terms of what I can get done. But as a cat, I can sneak around and not have any witch hunters come and grab me. So there's no way to increase your suspicion or get caught if you are in animal form. So that has its benefits too, but you're going to need to swap back to your witch at some point because you'll want to do some actions that the witch can do, or you'll want to retrieve your cards again, which requires you to continuously swap between human form and animal form. We found in this second expansion that this one changes the game quite a lot because not only does it build in this complicated mechanic of when you want to retrieve your cards, which is really interesting, especially if you're a thinker, because it kind of increases the amount of hand management that you need to do. It does reduce the impact of the witch hunters and the suspicion overall. So it feels like that is quite suppressed in terms of a game mechanic. So it's just an interesting dynamic that's going to help bring a bit of replayability into the game. Love to see more expansions for this game because at its base, it does start to feel a little bit repetitive, but luckily there's those expansions to bring them in and make it feel fresh again. And with that all out of the way, why should you back this game? This game is amazing.
Yeah.
I loved it from the first moment we played it.
I agree. Like I really, as soon as it kind of came out on the table and started kind of figuring out how everything kind of pieces together, I was like, ooh, this feels good. Even just that first action of selecting, you know, the puzzle of like, you know, what resources am I going to start with? Like, there's just so many elements that feel really good. And I feel like, yeah, the first game you're always going to be wrapping your head around things a bit. From the second game on, it's good stuff.
It's beautiful. It plays well. We've played it not solo because they hadn't completed the solo version of the game yet. We've played it different player counts. The time per player is spot on at 25 minutes per person, of course, once you've got over the teach game. So it's not too arduous. And when you have to make some changes for a 2-player game, they are really easy to make. So yeah, it's a really fun mid-weight game that I think a lot of people are really, really going to enjoy. It's beautiful. Can't wait to see what they do with the deluxified components in the game. Can't imagine how it can even get better than this, but I'm excited to see. We hope you enjoyed this preview. If you did, please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game video content soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.